Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's study session for the city of Casa Grande. You guys are in charge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Thank you for the opportunity to come before the mayor and council this evening and present in this study session format information related to Prop 207, the Smart and Safe Arizona Act, the adult use of marijuana. I'm sure that all of you, like many of our residents, understand that on November 3rd, the ballot question received sufficient vote to actually pass. It was approved. Staff is going to provide a overview tonight, a presentation to the mayor and council on a couple of different topics. But before I get started on that, I do want the council to know that we have a corresponding ordinance that staff is proposing to mayor and council, and we'll talk a little more about that here in a bit during our regular council meeting. But our hopes are, while we've got a number of slides we want to go through, that we can engage the mayor and council and get some level of feedback on what we're proposing at this time related to Prop 207, at least from a local regulations perspective. And potentially, if there are some amendments that would need to be made to that ordinance, that staff could spend a little time before we get into the regular meeting talking about those, so that we can ensure that the mayor and council are considering the ordinances as we discuss here this evening. So we've elected as a team to actually break this presentation down into what I consider to be three components. I will give a bit of an overview to the mayor and council about Proposition 207 and really the various provisions that were considered and approved as part of that ballot measure. I will then ask Mr. Paul Tice to speak on the existing zoning as it relates to medical marijuana, and and dispensaries specifically. There are some important provisions within our existing code that I want to refresh the mayor and council's memory on. And then lastly, I'll ask Mr. Brett Wallace to talk a bit about the proposed ordinance and some of the driving factors behind our recommendation this evening. And so let's just, and I know that the mayor and council has received information related to the proposition, and obviously all of you have likely reviewed that prior to casting the ballot on November the 3rd. But a couple of the provisions that I think that are key for the mayor and council to understand as we move into tonight's presentation is that the approval of Prop 207 essentially allows an individual who is at least 21 years of age to, and I guess I should advance the slides, to possess, consume, purchase, transport, and manufacture 1 ounce or less of marijuana. Moreover, individuals who are 21 years of age and older can grow no more than 6 marijuana plants in a resident, and that number can actually increase to 12 if you have 2 adults that are 21 years of age and older living in the same residence, provided, however, that the plants cannot be viewed or viewable by the public and must be in a secure location. And the proposition does go into a bit of the details of what that secure location actually requires. It allows both an existing medical dispensary or other applicant to seek to become a licensed establishment with the ability to engage in the retail sale, cultivation, and manufacture of marijuana and marijuana products. I want to highlight this particular issue because I think it's important for everybody to understand that the city of Casa Grande does have 1 medical marijuana dispensary in one of our 3 districts that are currently zoned or allowed, will allow for the dispensary. Moving on to additional provisions of the proposition, it restricts a local government from enacting rules that are more restrictive for a non-medical establishment than provided for medical establishments, or from restricting a dual license that has both a medical or non-medical license from providing retail sales of non-medical marijuana. We'll talk a little more about that. I think that's important, an important component because we do have a medical marijuana dispensary in town today. The proposition does allow local governments to prohibit adult use marijuana establishments other than dual licenses if they exist. Again, another important component based on our proposed ordinance this evening, and testing facilities from operating within their jurisdiction, as well as restricting delivery of marijuana within the city. So the proposition does give local jurisdictions some authority over the dispensing of recreational or adult use marijuana. And I should have pointed this out earlier. It should be noted that the Arizona Department of Health Services actually controls the permitting of these and the licensing of these dispensaries and establishments. The city of Casa Grande does not have any type of authority in the permitting or licensing process. However, we do have the ability to establish zoning districts for establishments and dispensaries. An existing medical marijuana dispensary license can obtain a dual license to dispense both adult marijuana and medical marijuana as an early applicant beginning January 19th, 2021. A decision on the license must be made by Arizona Department of Health Services within 60 days. I do want the mayor and council to know that there's still what I consider to be a lot of work that has to be done by the Arizona Department of Health Services. The proposition gives some level of guidance through the approval and the statutes that will be established. But Arizona Department of Health Services controls the rules and regulations. They are going through that process now. In fact, staff participated on a stakeholder call last week that really focused on these early, what I would consider to be early applications that actually will, where applicants can begin to make their applications on January the 19th. Arizona Department of Health Services will develop the rules for marijuana establishments. ADHS has established draft rules for initial establishments of these licenses. I emphasize the word draft at this point. The rules the proposed rules that ADHS put out have not been finalized at this point. From the application perspective, have not been finalized at this point. They've allowed for public comment, and as you will hear later on in this presentation, there are other components of the proposition, such as the social equity permits that actually have not had any rules developed at this point in time. They are still working on those. The proposition does not allow the smoking of marijuana in a public place or open space, or the consumption of marijuana products while operating a vehicle.
Larry, how many other distribution points will there be? It has to be at least 2 in Pinal County, I think.
And I'll let Mr. Wallace expand on this, but each county will have up to 2, at a minimum of 2, right, Brett?
Right. The way that the licenses are distributed in the proposition are actually very similar to the way that they're done in the medical field for this. They're limited to 10% of the number of pharmacies. That's how they establish the initial number of licenses. But at least 2 in each county is what the proposition says. We believe we already have 2, meaning that we wouldn't fall under any of those bonus sort of must award licenses. But again, the early applicants, to be an early applicant, as Larry was saying, it really deals with the people that already have medical licenses, or if you're in a county with less than 2.
Coolidge was pretty anxious to get that originally. Are they set up for it, or do we know?
Who was that?
Coolidge?
I'm not sure whether if Coolidge has one yet or not. If they don't, then they wouldn't be able to do a early applicant.
Okay.
They would have to go through the second round, which is going to be through some random selection.
Just furthering what I consider to be some of the key provisions of the proposition is that it allows for the collection of an excise tax on all marijuana sales to customers. It establishes a smart and safe fund and establishes distribution guidelines of those funding sources, and it establishes the number of allowable licenses based on the number of existing pharmacies, as Mr. Wallace was just pointing out, in Arizona, and subject to adjustment to ensure the opportunity for at least 2 establishments per county. In addition, it will allow for 26 initial social equity licenses to be allocated throughout the state. And so, again, we do not have, outside of what was articulated in the proposition, any information on the social equity licenses. It was abundantly clear in the stakeholder meeting that we had last week that this is something that the department is going to focus on after they go through some level of the early applications. Oh, thank you. Sorry about that, Stephen. I want to talk just briefly, and certainly if there's any questions on the violations, I'll ask Mr. Wallace to weigh in. Most violations of the propositions are initially established as a petty offense, which for the first offense does not allow for jail time and imposes a base fine not to exceed $300. And the proposition provides for pending charges, dismissal of pending charges that would not have violated the proposition, and also provides an expungement of prior convictions. And then lastly, the proposition will change police practices related to probable cause and marijuana DUI, and the state legislature will likely need to act in order to provide clarification on some of these components. And so with those three provisions, I do want the council to understand that organizationally, we obviously are having to deal with the law enforcement component of this. Concurrently, there's still a fair amount of information that is now beginning to come into our department, and I know that Chief McCrory has been reviewing all of that, and we will be going through training for our law enforcement officers that are having to prepare for and actually deal with the passage of the Proposition 207. We also have, from a personnel policy perspective, our drug-free workplace that the city actually utilizes as part of our relationship with our internal employees. The primary focus tonight has really been with an emphasis on zoning and the ordinance that will be proposed in the regular council meeting. But I do want to assure the mayor and council that as information becomes available on those other two topics, we'll be sharing that with the mayor and council. And with that,
Expunging the existing, who does that, the state or the?
So under the terms of the proposition, you kind of have a couple of ways that can happen, but for most of the time, what's going to happen is a defendant will make a motion to have their conviction expunged. And essentially what it does is if you've been convicted of something previously that would not be illegal under the current act, you can ask for that to be expunged. And in fact, it's going to be a fairly rubber stamp process, because as long as it meets that, it will be granted by the courts.
Larry, if I have a question on the actual ordinance when it comes to the violation, should I go ask now, or do you want me to wait during the council meeting?
if it's on the ordinance that's being proposed
Yeah.
tonight, perhaps we can align it with the presentation on the ordinance, which is coming right after the zoning component, okay?
So I guess I'm next, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm going to just take a few minutes to refresh your memory on our existing zoning regulations regarding medical marijuana establishments and uses. So the top of this slide shows you, first off, the zone districts in which medical marijuana dispensaries may be located. And although you see a lot of zone districts shown there with the P with the footnote 3, it goes on to say they have to be within the overlay zone. And I'm going to show you a copy of the boundaries of the overlay zone. If you recall, we formatted that overlay zone of the area right around the hospital. The footnote for the 3 indicates that in addition to being an overlay zone, the use has to meet a series of separation requirements from various uses, and I'll refresh your memory on that in just a moment. The next line down is medical marijuana uses, and it says that they are allowed to be in both the I-1 and I-2 zone districts, industrial zone districts, subject to the same separation requirements that the footnote 3 refers to. The definition of medical marijuana uses is important to note that it includes collectively cultivation facilities, a dispensary, and infusion facilities. So it could be cultivation, dispensaries, and infusion. So this graphic shows you the boundaries of the medical marijuana overlay zone that was done around the hospital. In addition, what this graphic shows you is how much land within that overlay zone currently meets all the standards, the separation requirements, to allow additional dispensaries to locate. And as you can see, that's in yellow, and it's a very limited area within this overlay zone that could actually accommodate additional dispensaries if they were allowed to locate in the community. Both those lots that are shown as yellow are actually owned by Banner Health and would have to be re-subdivided so that the entire lot met the separation requirements. The red shows us where the existing Harvest dispensary is located. It's on the north end in a tenant suite in that building. So the next slide shows us a scenario where if the Harvest dispensary wasn't located in its existing location, so let's say, for example, Harvest said, we wanted to expand our dispensary due to the increased demand with the adult use as well as medical, maybe get some higher visibility. So if they were to leave their existing facility, it frees up additional land because there's a separation of 500 feet from other dispensaries. And that increases the amount of sites where, for example, Harvest could relocate, but those sites only free up if Harvest were to vacate their current premises. And once a additional dispensary was located on one of those yellow sites, a new buffer would be put in 500 feet around that dispensary, which would probably eliminate all the other sites available. So I think it's kind of fair to say that, you know, you could have one, maybe two at the most dispensaries with our current separation requirements in our medical marijuana overlay zone.
Paul, where would they be growing it, on that same property, or?
The growing,
Yes.
that's a great segue into my next slide,
Okay, I'll be
which
quiet.
really is going to talk about cultivation facilities. So both in the Harvest one today, they do not grow there. It's just a retail dispensary. I don't believe Harvest has any intention to actually combine a grow facility with their retail sales. Grow facilities would be within that definition of the medical marijuana uses. If you remember, the medical marijuana uses are allowed in our Industrial 1, I-1, and I-2 zone districts. This map shows you the location citywide of those in the two shades of purple. But when we apply our separation requirements to all those industrial sites, and you can see the separation requirements are listed in A through H there. Once we apply those separation requirements, it further restricts the potential industrial sites that could theoretically accommodate a marijuana use. Today, a medical marijuana use. Depending on how we change the code, it could just be a marijuana use, but it clearly further restricts those sites. Now, we actually have had recently some inquiries to constructing cultivation facilities in Casa Grande. So we've actually had 4, what I'm going to call fairly live proposals. None of these are in the building permit stage, but people have asked us to look at the sites to confirm they met all of the separation requirements. And so we have one up in our industrial airport, in an existing building in our airport industrial park. We have one on VIP. Happens to be a building that right now was can't think of the manufacturing type. It was like a fiberglass manufacturing, I think, and they're tearing down a bunch of the old piping and venting right now with the idea of coming in for interior remodel for that. We had one at the Golden Eagle site, and so that met all the criteria. And then we had our newest one was on Hannah Road, right behind the facility that was the old Tremel Crow building that Lucid is located part of their facility in. So all 4 of those sites meet the requirements for cultivation. because they're industrially zoned, they meet all the separations, but as you know, as a medical marijuana use, in addition to cultivation, they could also have dispensaries by the definition today. And so they haven't asked for dispensaries. Our current code only, our Arizona Department of Health Services regs limit us to one dispensary currently in Casa Grande, so there is no ability. But if that restriction gets lifted by Arizona Department of Health Services, our current zoning code would allow dispensaries as well as cultivation at these locations. And it would be cultivation and infusion, like where they can make edibles and food products, edible products as well.
Does cultivation need to be inside a building?
Yes, it does, and it has to be secured, yes.
Was there something in the ordinance about testing facilities?
So testing facilities are kind of new in the new rules with ADHS, and so a lot of these new dispensaries are going to want the marijuana tested for certain aspects of it. Our current code is silent on where testing facilities could be, and so that's one of the policy decisions I think we're going to have to talk about is do we allow them where in our industrial zones as well, or how do we treat testing facilities? So I think it's time to pass it off to Brett.
Thanks. So I get to talk about the ordinance probably because it's more legal in nature. So I'll be happy to do that, and of course, answer any other questions that anybody has. As you guys probably know, many cities and towns have kind of taken the opportunity over the last couple of months since the passing of the proposition to take a look at how they're going to try to incorporate these uses within their city. Staff's recommendation to you is essentially to start with a ban on the facilities that we can ban, to allow us at a minimum to implement zoning regulations, as Paul was talking about with testing, to kind of take a look at where we can go. And so as we go through this ordinance tonight, if there are things that you don't want to put in, we certainly can amend that, as early as tonight, but understand that we've kind of taken a broad brush here with the idea being, let's stop it for now to the extent that we can, and then back it off if council desires to do that, as we see the ADH rules get in place, and as we see our zoning for things happen as well. And so we'll kind of go through what that is. Primarily, this ordinance is based on the work of the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. We had a group of attorneys that sort of worked through a model ordinance, and I've tried to stay as close to that model as we can because we want all the cities and towns to have as close to common regulations as we can, so we can defend them if necessary in that way. And so just looking at the ordinance real quickly, we start with, we're going to have a lot of things that are going to be in the zoning code. This is not a zoning ordinance right now. This is only in our health and safety code, and it's designed to utilize the provisions of the proposition that said we can do certain things, to say this is the way we're going to regulate the uses generally in our community. And as Paul was talking about, we're going to follow that up with the changes to the zoning code to implement them. So for example, as we get into the dual licensee, Harvest at this point is the only one that could, but if they apply for a dual license, that would be permitted under our ordinance, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But we really don't have a good zoning for that right now. We would treat it as the medical, but with some of the changes that Paul's group is going to be looking at do we just put in medical and dual licensees, for example, right? And some of those will have to be changed in all of those different things. So we start out with a lot of really exciting definitions. If you guys have any questions on those, let me know. For the most part, they're definitions directly out of the statute. Yes, sir.
Testing facilities, are they is like a DUI, the amount that you have in your system, or what's the testing?
So two separate things. For the testing facilities themselves that are talked about in the proposition, that's actually going to be, since now they're going to be selling marijuana for adult use and edibles, they have certain criteria in there. Like they can have, if you're going to advertise, kind of like the FDA, if you're going to say it has, 37% THC, they want to make sure that they're going to test that and find that that's there. Make sure there's no solvents or anything else that the department rules don't allow. So the testing facilities are going to be akin to a laboratory. And they're going to have to be either the department or someone that the department will license. They haven't put the rules in place yet, and so when we get to that part of the ordinance, you'll see that for now we've said let's ban those testing facilities, at least until we have time to go through the zoning I think a number of cities are going to look at those as potentially needing, for example, a conditional use permit instead of being being principally permitted. And so those are the things we're going to try to address in the zoning. And then if you wanted to then allow the testing facilities, we'd have the rules in place that would allow us to do so safely. Staff's original thought was not to ban the testing because we figured it was like a laboratory use, similar to what we would have expected in medical marijuana. But in light of the fact that we don't really have the zoning in place for it right now, to avoid any issues, we're kind of asking that we stop that until we get those zoning rules in place. And then the second point to your component has to do with a little bit more of dealing with like DUIs. And I know we got another question of that earlier today. And so it's not addressed in our ordinance, but I certainly a Prop 207 thing, so I'll kind of talk about it. There's not going to be a number, at least yet, that's going to presume that you are impaired if you are under marijuana, under the influence of marijuana, okay? Today, under DUI, we have a couple of different things, but under 1381A3, we go back about 7 or 8 years ago. If you had any marijuana or its metabolite in its system and you were driving, you were going to be found guilty of driving under the influence of marijuana. And we do the same thing for other drugs on Schedule 1, Schedule 2. If you're driving with those in your system, you can't be doing that. The Medical Marijuana Act did a couple of different things. The first thing it did is it established an affirmative defense for a medical patient to say, for example, I had the right to use this, and then they could establish that they were not impaired. This act goes a step further, and it says you can't use the metabolites at all as a per se, violation of the statute. So what happened is the Supreme Court about 2014, looking at the medical marijuana, there was a case where they had taken blood and they used the inactive metabolite in marijuana, which I think is carboxy-THC, but that inactive metabolite can stay in your system for 28 to 30 days, but it's inactive. And so the Supreme Court said, you can't base a DUI conviction off of that because there's no reason to think that you might be impaired. You could have taken this 3 weeks ago, right? 4 weeks ago. The alcohol is going to be out of your system tomorrow, right? You know, the marijuana is going to be out of your system tomorrow, but the remnant may be there for 28 to 30 days. So currently, if we wanted to prove a A3 violation, the per se drug violation, we'd have to show that you had the active THC in your system. And that's really only going to be somebody who you catch pretty much right after ingesting marijuana. Under this proposition, even if they have the active THC in there, you're still going to have to show that they're impaired to the slightest degree, which is just in our traditional A1, we have to show that, for example, we look at your field sobriety test. You know, how did you do on those, right? What was your driving? How was your speech? All the different things that you look to determine whether a driver is impaired. But there's no per se limit. And if you have any metabolite in, it won't be a per se conviction simply for that. It's going to have to be based on A1. What the proposition does do is it allows, if there becomes a national standard, and the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration adopts a national standard, then Arizona could adopt the same national standard as a per se rule. So for example, Colorado, Washington, I think Montana, Illinois, all use an active number of 5 nanograms of THC. Nevada uses 2. Arizona couldn't use any right now unless it becomes a scientifically accepted thing and NHTSA, NHTSA adopts it. So there won't be any, if you have 4 nanograms, you're okay. You know, if you have 6, you're not. It's just going to be whether we can prove baseline impairment, which will be based on your driving and behavior.
So we should be smoking marijuana now.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Not on city property.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So one of the first things that we talk about, so first of all, Prop 207 regulates smoking of marijuana. And it says that you cannot smoke marijuana in a public place or an open space. It uses public place the same as the Smoke-Free Arizona Act. And so that kind of covers your restaurants, your airports, you know, bars. You can't smoke marijuana in places that you can't smoke. It's actually a little bit broader than that because even on like the patios, for example, like if you're on the Dell's patio, you can smoke a cigarette, you still can't smoke marijuana. And I use the term smoke because they use the term smoke. There are other ways that you can ingest marijuana that are not stopped by the act in public places or open spaces. So if you're consuming an edible, if you're using a vape pen, there was an Arizona Attorney General's opinion that said that vape pens were not smoking because it doesn't actually ignite the marijuana. So those kind of things would still potentially be legal in public places and open spaces. Honestly, we've gone back and forth on how to address that because at some point, from an enforcement standpoint, it's very difficult. If you don't know if someone's eating M&Ms or if they're taking an edible, and it's very difficult to prove which one you do, even if you can show that they have an edible with them, they're allowed to possess it. And so that's one of those where you just sort of say, what do you really do about it and whether you should ban it at all for the consumption, smoking certainly. But we've taken the position now to ban consumption partially because of vaping, because there's not enough information about vaping. There have been some studies that show that residual cannabis can land on the surfaces and otherwise, which tells you if you're next to someone else, maybe they get it. So while, at least this first draft, we are banning all consumption in the places that we're allowed to ban it. Okay? We can't ban it in private areas via city council because of the proposition, but we can ban it on areas that we control, right? Property that is owned or controlled by the city. And so what this ordinance does is it bans all of the things that we're allowed to do. So you can't cultivate it on our property, you can't manufacture it, or possess it, smoke it, or consume it. And so if we want to have something lesser than that, we can certainly do that. And again, like everything here, we can also peel it back as time goes on. So
How
that's
does this affect the cartels?
that's really a good question, right? And not one that fortunately we hopefully have to deal with, and better for Chief McCrory. It is going to be an interesting thing, and we've talked about it a lot in terms of what the market for marijuana is going to look like, because you're going to have more legal ways to purchase it. Those legal ways are going to be subject to taxation and surcharges. There may be some people that don't want to go, through that thing, but at least the last briefings that we had is they're just going to say more meth, right? Less marijuana, more meth, and the cartels will probably be resilient in that. We have seen less, at least from the Border Patrol numbers that I saw recently, fewer marijuana transfers coming in, and that's nationwide, partially because you're growing it here in the United States now much more freely. So, but I don't know any cartel members that I know of, and I haven't asked and don't want to speak to
Is
that.
growing marijuana without being permissioned by the state to do it, is that still illegal?
So,
I mean, you can take so many home, but I'm talking about
Right.
some guys would take a cotton field and take the middle of it
right.
and put marijuana there, so from the air you couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah, so for grow operations, you would have to be licensed, big grow operations, you have to be licensed by the department in order to do those. What the proposition does, though, is it does allow individuals to grow up to 6 plants at their home, and Larry had spoke to that, as long
12
as it's
if you're married,
in
yeah.
an enclosed, 12 if you have another person over 21 that's at the house. It's a very big change, and it's a very interesting thing, and as the department goes forward with medical marijuana, it'll be interesting too, because you may recall back in 2010, we had a number of conversations about it, and you kind of wanted a dispensary in your community. And the reason you wanted a dispensary is that if you had a dispensary, then no one within 25 miles of that dispensary could grow in their house, right? So they weren't allowed to do that, even though the Medical Marijuana Act allows caregivers to grow. So that's why we don't have any caregivers that are allowed to grow here in Casa Grande, because we have a dispensary, so we don't have that. This proposition now allows everybody with an adult in their home to grow in their home. So it'll be interesting to see how they start to allocate these medical dispensaries in light of the fact that people can just grow on their own now anyway. So the effort you had with kind of these CHAWs and how we're going to allocate these around the state to reduce the amount of home growth is now going to be very interesting. And ADHS is permitting, under their existing rules, medical dispensaries to move from one location to another. And so even though we only have one right now, under ADH rules, there is always the potential of a second medical dispensary locating here in the city as well. And that's when we get to the next part, of the ordinance, which actually bans marijuana establishments except for dual licensees. So what we're doing with this provision of the ordinance is to say, I don't know where it's at in there, but are we on there? Okay, so.
Hey, Brett,
yeah.
before you go to that next section,
Yes.
because I have a question on the one above that, the
Sure.
public property. So, well, first of all, I was happy to see this ordinance, because I think it's kind of a moderate approach. And, I know I've been reading on what some of the other cities are doing, Scottsdale and Gilbert, and something very similar. So I'm really happy to see that, we're just a little conservative and just kind of see where it's gonna go and what we need to do. So doing the dual license is a good idea starting out. But my question is the violation piece. So I understand that we ban, and especially the number one, where it talks about possess, smoke, consume, sell, and distribute. And then when you talk at the violation, it says A1, it's a misdemeanor, and the others are a petty offense. So I guess my only concern is, I get on public property if they're selling and distributing, consuming, but if they're possessing and smoking, should it still be a misdemeanor? That was my only thing is looking at that misdemeanor versus the petty offense.
Absolutely, and I think it's a good question. I actually spent a lot of time with my prosecutors today talking about that kind of same thing, partially because we have a little bit of a typo. We meant to say a Class 2 misdemeanor, so I'm glad you actually brought it up because it's a typographical error. The reason that we used a Class 2 misdemeanor is that it's very similar to what we do, for example, if you have open alcohol containers on city property. And we went back and forth in the drafting of this, and I'm open to do either one of dealing with possess, smoke, or consume as just a petty offense, similar to what it would be anywhere else. Cultivate, manufacture, if you
Right.
start using our parts to try to
Selling
try to
it or whatever.
manufacture or sell, right, then we want to make sure that that has a little bit stiffer penalty. But I completely agree, and the penalty is ultimately up to you guys. We can change that piece to probably move possess, smoke, or consume and make that a petty offense. In fact, we spoke about that today. The other ones, we are recommending a Class 2, simply because it's going to be a more serious violation, like you're growing at our golf course, right? So, as opposed to simply having some, when you walk onto City Hall campus.
Well, you want it to be serious, but then, you don't want someone to go through that process of having
But it's legal, too.
misdemeanor.
I
Pardon me?
But it's legal to possess.
Right,
You know.
exactly, and smoke.
will be, yeah.
And, everything else. So I don't know, I don't know how anyone else feels, but that was my only thing is having a misdemeanor.
It's a
Yeah.
good point, and then the rules that we have to realize have to be enforced.
Exactly.
And so
Right.
are we making that more difficult by something like Matt said that it's gonna be legal?
Right.
Yeah, and I think, I appreciate the question, and it was something that we were already looking at, and I think it does make a lot of sense to deal with possess, smoke, or consume solely as a petty offense, much like you would do anywhere else. But the other ones, I'd recommend you still have a Class 2, even a Class 2 misdemeanor is a relatively minor offense, but I think the intent of the proposition was to try to decriminalize as much as possible
Exactly,
basic
yeah.
possession and consumption.
Right.
So it's a
Okay.
great question. So on the marijuana establishments, we are prohibiting standalone establishments at this time through this ordinance. That's something that the ordinance, the proposition allows us to do. And at this point, what we're doing is prohibiting them unless they are with a dual licensee that is in the same location and is maintaining its medical license. So at this point, we have only one of those, which would mean Harvest would be, if they proceeded to get a license, a dual license, they would be permitted, but no one else who's not a medical dispensary could locate here. As Paul showed you, there are still a number of places that a medical dispensary could potentially locate here if they were licensed by ADHS or moved from a different location to do that. We haven't heard of anyone trying to do that at this point, but I just want to make sure everyone understands it's a possibility. When you look at most of the ordinances that the cities have passed, you see the papers saying we're limiting it to one, but none of the ordinances actually do that. They limit it to dual licensees, and they currently only have one. And, so there's always the possibility of another medical coming in which would allow you to have another potential retail. So your options really on this are, you can allow retail standalone establishments, and if you did that, you could limit the number of standalone establishments, or you can prohibit them, but we don't prohibit dual licensees because the statute says we can't. I've seen one city say they're both prohibited, but that's because they don't have any medical at this point, and so they think that they can do that. I'm not sure that if they have a medical transfer in there, since they allow for medical, they'll be successful with that. But again, I think right now, most cities and towns are trying to maintain their status quo until such time as, you really get a sense from their council and the community what you might want, and also deal with it from a zoning perspective to make sure that any facilities are located in an area that you would feel comfortable with. So except for dual licensees, we prohibit marijuana establishments. We also prohibit marijuana testing for the same reason until such time. And staff was originally going to not put this in, but since we don't have the zoning regulations in, we didn't want to see these pop up, or at least try to pop up in places that we don't think are appropriate.
So realistically, when you say we can, wait and see, once zoning, I mean, what, are we saying we'll look at it in a year, or you look at it in a couple of years? It can kind of depend on maybe
I
leagues
think
of
it's gonna
cities and
depend on
towns.
what the state comes up with, right?
I think,
Yeah.
Right.
look, you have the opportunity to look, Councilmember Fitzgibbons, at it at any time. Right now, I think staff's position was, let's take the most conservative approach we can, at least until we work on some of our zoning, to make sure that we don't have any ambiguity in our zoning, because right now we don't expressly address the retail sale of marijuana. Because it's retail oriented, because it is the sale of that, Paul would probably try to say, I think it should only be places where the medical dispensaries are, because that's the closest thing to that we have. But an applicant should say, I'm no different than any other retail. You tax me like retail, so I want to be at the promenade, or I want to be across the street from City Hall. And we want to make sure that if our community wants that, we go through zoning and make sure that it's only in places that we feel comfortable. If we feel comfortable allowing standalone establishments in a business or commercial zone, that's okay. And we can always repeal these provisions that ban that.
Right.
But once they're here, you can't stop that. You can't take those rights away from them. So we really have to do it now or never. But you can always pull this back. We'll be evaluating it. We'll all be going through this process constantly. It's going to be a continuous program as we look at what happens here and throughout the rest of the state. So whenever you're ready to make a change, for example, if we get the zoning in, we may want to bring back at least the testing part and say, hey, we think we're comfortable with zoning for testing. Do you want to allow that? Do you not want to allow that? Because we can back off on any parts of this ordinance at any time.
Hey, Brad, I think the best way it was described to me too is that we need to take this action now because we don't really know all the rules yet. So we take it now before it's enacted, then we can back off. Because I don't think we should allow a monopoly either, right? Just one location. So that was my biggest concern. But
Start in first grade, huh?
as it was described to me, we can, once we see the rules, because right now we don't know all the rules. And once we see the rules, we can then back off of what we're doing tonight. Go ahead, Matt.
One thing is, we don't want to miss an opportunity either. I don't know how much tax dollars this is, but Brett, is the January 19th, is that only for existing medical to apply? So we don't know how many we could possibly have here?
Right. So just from a timing perspective, and it's a good question and the response I was going to give to the mayor's point as well. The January 19th through March 9th period is only for early applicants. And early applicants under the proposition are those holding existing medical licenses and kind of what I'll call bonus establishments if your county doesn't have at least two.
And do we know?
We think we
county
do.
does.
We think there's some in AJ that qualify, in Santan, but we are trying to find that out. ADHS didn't know that answer on Thursday in our call. They knew that, 7 counties, I think, 7 or 8 counties only have one, but it looks like those are mostly outlying counties. So those are the only early applicants. So this first process from January 19th through March 9th, only early applicants can get those.
So really,
this
we're
isn't-
dealing with one. in
We're only gonna be
Casa
dealing
Grande.
with, we're only gonna be dealing with one, unless we get a transfer of a medical one in the next few days, but there's really nothing that's pending. We haven't gotten any zoning applications, as Mr. Tice said, for dispensaries. So we're really looking at only one during the early application period. After the early application period, however many licenses have not been distributed will then be available in a second round, and that will be via random selection.
Like the first time around.
And we'll have a better idea of when that is as ADHS finishes their rules. So you may, if you want to allow for those locations, you know, a few months from now, it would be March, April, May, June, we may want to back this off by then, but that also gives Mr. Tice and his group time to put in some of those zoning regulations so that when we do back that off, we understand what those regulations are. Some may be very simple. We may just change recreational from marijuana, you know, from medical, but that would allow sort of an unlimited number in our industrial zones. So that's what we're going to look at, and both your planning commission, our public, and you will obviously get to see all of those zoning ones. And at that time, if you do want to allow additional areas, you have the opportunity to do that, even if it's a standalone.
Because no matter what we feel about it or anyone feels about it, it's legal now. You know, just like alcohol, some people don't agree with that, and I think we're gonna be treating it more like that, because we don't wanna miss opportunities, and you gotta look at it too from a business. I'm sure you guys have been called from realtors too, like, hey, there's not a lot of places in our existing zone, and people are beating down the door. I think it's gonna be very limited, though, how many, I don't think there'll be 10, because I don't think there'll be that many licenses, but we won't know. But I wanna make sure that we don't miss any opportunities either by doing this, but like you said, we won't know our number until March-ish, but we can undo it or change it pretty quick. And I don't know if you guys, before this, since we're doing this, you know, I drove by a bunch. You can't go in them unless you're a patient now, right? And they're all nice-looking places. You know, it's not like there's lines of people out front hanging. I mean, they're all nice-looking retail establishments, and you know, I think that's a big fear that people have. But when we were up there this weekend, I thought, well, you know, there's billboards, so you know where they are, and it's pretty simple to find. But it's something to think about, is people have this impression of it, you know, and it may not, but that's what we would come to down the road, because again, I don't want people, and now that we have this ordinance, I'm sure people will say, hey, I think this would be a good place for one, and then we could get a feel for the community and what they think in that area, if they think that's a good place.
Yeah, so again, you have either option. The ordinance as drafted right now would not allow those standalone establishments, but as I said, and as you just pointed out, we can always pull that back after you've kind of dealt with it from a zoning perspective. And the zoning, we think, is really a useful tool, because they do a good job of getting out in the community. The industry will be paying attention to what you're doing from a zoning perspective as well. And, you know, there's multiple opportunities for public input throughout the zoning process.
The existing place right now that's out by the hospital, if we decided we just wanted that to do medical and recreation, period, and no one else involved, can we do that, or does that have to?
So I'm going to answer, it depends, because that's my favorite answer. But effectively, you're doing that now if you adopt this ordinance. But I say that because under ADHS rules, an existing medical dispensary could still locate in the city. And I don't believe under the proposition, we can limit it to one dual licensee. And I say that because if another medical came and wanted to go in one of those areas that Mr. Tice showed you, that would be allowed today. And once they're here as a medical, they would be allowed to get a license as a dual licensee. So your actions tonight would effectively limit it to the one existing medical dispensary for the time being. But if we have a second medical locate, we would not be able to prohibit them from also being a dual licensee. We have no reason to believe that's happening right now, but I want to have that caveat, because if I don't, they'll come in like in 30 days and it'll look bad for me.
I do have a question for Paul. Paul, Because at one point in time, I had the understanding that it couldn't locate, or medical marijuana couldn't locate in the airport industrial park.
We have a separation from the airport itself, but not a prohibition within the airport industrial park. It's on a piece of property that's not owned by us. It's an existing building privately owned. So we have a separation from the airport, and it meets that. If you look at the graphic on the top, you might be able to tell that the lots right adjacent to the airport boundary are not available. This one happens to be right off Centennial Road.
Okay, thank you. I knew there was a distance, but I wasn't sure how much, if any, of our park it included. So it does include some of the park. Okay,
Well, if we
thank
don't
you.
do it right, Cheech and Chung are gonna handle the reservations in the Holiday Inn.
Possible.
Brett, on the 6 plants per individual, has the state set guidelines of where you can and cannot grow that yet?
Only through the proposition, and they're gonna have a hard time dealing with where you can and can't grow that. We're not allowed to zone it and say you can't do it in,
Front yard.
residential, or you can't do it in, an apartment. They're allowed to grow that. What the proposition says, it must be in a facility that is secured from minors and not basically visible to the public from the naked eye. And so it's going to be, when you adopt an initiative like this that the voters did, we have a provision called the Voter Protection Act that really stops the state from enacting regulations that would pull back on that. That happened for a number of years ago after initiatives were passed and the state essentially gutted them because the legislature didn't believe in it or the council didn't believe in it. So they're really going to be hard pressed to put a lot of regulations in because you're not going to have to ask permission to do that. You can grow as of right without asking for any permission from the city, from our zoning or otherwise. So it's going to need to be in like a closet, a greenhouse, other security that they can secure. But other than that, there's not going to really be any regulations. If they violate them, the first violation is also a petty offense.
Are you done?
If you don't have any questions, I'm done.
Anybody have any other questions?
Just a comment, if I can, for the mayor and the city council. We've heard this evening about the potential of an amendment to the proposed ordinance related to violations. Are there other elements that the council's interested in providing some guidance?
I forgot to ask about delivery, because we had this question last time, and delivery, I think, would solve some people's problems too, because then you wouldn't have a place, it just goes.
So two things on the delivery, and I'm glad you mentioned. I said I was done because I didn't want to talk anymore, but I didn't go over the delivery
Here
section.
I am making you work.
No, I didn't go over the delivery section. We've put delivery in prohibited right now because the statute allows us to do that. We're going to have plenty of time in reviewing those regulations because under the proposition, the department can't allow delivery until 2023.
Okay.
But they must allow delivery by 2025. So the main reason that we put delivery in was to try to make sure that nobody tries to do an Uber Smokes here where they say, I'll go get it for you. It would violate the department's regulations, but that's going to be a more difficult thing for us to address. There's actually a severe civil penalty if a marijuana establishment tries to deliver without getting the rules first. But since there's not really anything else, we can kind of stop that. What you cannot prohibit under the act, though, as I say this for delivery, this is really delivery for a fee. Because what you cannot stop under the act is people transferring 1 ounce or less of marijuana as long as it's not for remuneration. So if you're not getting paid to do it, you can pick some up and deliver it to your house, right? Or to a friend that isn't able to go out. You just can't make money off of doing it.
And the other thing I can't remember in the ordinance, but is the recreational, so they have the testing sites now, because is the recreational limited different than the medical as far as potency, I've heard?
Yeah,
Is that
I
true?
think, and I don't know the actual,
but it's
the actual medical
different, right?
pieces, but it is, with respect to edibles, there is a limit on what the potency is, how you measure that. I think it's 10 milligrams per separated dose, and the container can't have more than 100. So it is going to be a little bit different than what you can do. It's also different, and it's a good point, the Medical Marijuana Act, a lot of people have said it goes away once you do recreational. It doesn't. It actually is still in place, and it can make a difference for some individuals because, for example, if you are still a medical card holder, you can have up to 2.5 ounces of marijuana versus someone that only has 1. You can, if you are a caregiver that's allowed to grow, we don't have any, you can grow 12 plants per person that you give care for. So they can have up to 72 in their home. We don't have any of those. That's why we wanted a dispensary in the first place, was to stop that. But the medical marijuana doesn't go away, which is why in our delivery section, we say, hey, if the ADHS allows for medical delivery, we are going to allow it as well, because we weren't allowed under the Medical Act to stop things like that.
And is
Brett,
it,
how do the people that are cultivating it, how do they market it?
I don't know what they normally do, but ordinarily under the rules, they need to already have buyers for it.
They have to have a
Arizona's
dispensary.
not licensing currently
Be licensed?
anyone to grow for out of state. So they're growing only for dispensaries, and each dispensary is allowed to have, or needs to have a designated grower essentially. So some of the cultivation facilities, and I would let Mr. Tice answer to this because he's dealt with them more, but some of them may come in and say, we're growing for harvest, and it's gonna be for these 4 facilities, for example. But it's gonna be for that. They have to have a specific dispensary to get a cultivation license. So you can't just get a license right now from ADHS to just grow and sell it to whomever you want.
and what is the tax then?
So there's a kind of a convoluted piece, but the surcharge is about 16%. So it's subject to your normal retail taxes, which were at what, 9.8?
9.2.
9.2. So it's subject to all of our retail sales taxes. We cannot raise it on marijuana. We can raise all of our sales taxes, but we have to float all boats the same. We can't tax that more. It's subject to a surcharge of, I think, 16%. There's also a provision, though, that makes that, if the federal government starts decriminalizing it and taxing it, that caps the tax rate at 30% overall. And that money goes into a designated fund that goes to a number of different things, but the city will actually see some of that fund because it goes towards, her funding is getting some of it. Police, fire, medical, based on how many people you have in PSPRS statewide, will get some of that as well. No one knows what those numbers will be yet.
But medical is not subject to that then, right?
Right,
Just
medical is different, you're not subject to the tax, and you don't see any of those. And that's why I say, there's still gonna be 2 regimes. There's still gonna be medical and non-medical.
When you say no one knows, there's got to be some type of research where in other states where they had just a medical and then went to a,
Colorado,
yeah.
Nevada.
There are
any way
numbers
to
in-
estimate that at all?
I think we could guess, and I think the
Yeah.
state sort of looked at it, but the problem is you just don't know what your market is until you see what your market
Yeah.
is. And each one is gonna be a little bit different. So, right, because everyone's taxing it
Yeah.
differently. Colorado saw it go up like 300 million, I think, in a year, and California was close to the same, but California's got a lot more people, so it just goes to show you, you really don't know until you start to
Do
put
they
it
pay the
in.
regular sales tax at an Arizona rate when they sell it?
Yes,
And for retail, yes, not for medical.
not for medical.
Medical's not taxed, right?
Any other questions? Anybody?
No, but Brett, I appreciate the information that your staff has done, and, it's kind of a no-win situation without having the rules yet from ADHS, so it's kind of disconcerting in that regard, but I think this is our best option at this point. Oh.
Yeah, does anybody have any issue with Lisa's suggestion on those changes?
I think that's great.
No, that's a good point.
Can we make those changes then before we hear it tonight?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
We're running very short on time, but just one clarifying point, well, I shouldn't say clarifying point, but additional point for the community that may be watching us. The zoning ordinances, as Mr. Wallace has pointed out, obviously has a completely different process then the ordinance that we're proposing tonight under our health and safety, it has to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission, have public hearings and the like. This particular ordinance is under health and safety, and given the timing of this, staff will, at the second read, be encouraging the council to pass it with an emergency clause so that it would become effective at that moment. But again, we will outline that again during the regular meeting.
Okay. No other questions, then we'll stand adjourned on the study session, and you got a minute.
One more
All right, good evening. We'll start tonight's meeting. Call the meeting to order. This is the City of Casa Grande, December 21st City Council meeting. Welcome, everyone. First order of business is our invocation, but I don't see anybody here for that. Matt, would you mind taking care of that for us? And then we'll have,
Wait,
oh, there he is.
yeah.
I'm sorry, you're hiding behind the podium.
Absolutely.
And then we'll stay standing, and I'll lead us in the pledge since Bob's not here.
How are you doing?
I expected Mr. Powell to recognize me. He did, and he did not recognize me. Thank you so much. Would you bow your heads and hearts with me? By the way, I'm Tim Pruitt, pastor of the Pinal County Cowboy Church. Let's pray together. Father in heaven, I thank you again for this wonderful day that you've given to us, for every blessing of life that you've showered upon us. Father, as we begin tonight, I want to pray for those that are sick, especially those that are sick with the COVID, whether they're at home or in the hospitals. Father, I pray for them. I pray for their help, for their health, and for their healing. Father, I thank you this evening for this great nation that we live in, whose motto is, "In God we trust." Father, I pray today that we would truly trust in you during these difficult and challenging times. Father, I thank you for this great state of Arizona. Father, our motto is God enriches. I want to thank you for the way that you have enriched my life and my family's life these many years that we've enjoyed living here in Casa Grande. Father, tonight I especially want to pray for our mayor and this city council. Father, for each and every member, I pray that you would give them wisdom and understanding. Father, give them courage to lead during these tough times. Give them strength. Give them wisdom and understanding. And I humbly pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry I messed everybody up there. Pastor Tim, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How's your father? Good, good.
All right, let the roll call show everyone is present except Bob Huddleston. Would someone like to offer him an excuse?
Move to excuse.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of excusing Bob from tonight's meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor,
Right, please
dealing
note.
with the minutes, we have the city council special meeting minutes from December 7th and the city council regular meeting minutes from the newly formed council on December 7th also. And I move that we approval of both of these.
Second?
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Claims against the city, D, item D.
Mayor McFarland, I move to accept and pay the claims dated December 2nd through December 15th, 2020 as presented.
Second?
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, claims are approved. Meeting agenda approval. I think we have one change on here, the swearing in of the firefighters we're gonna scratch, so we scratch that off your agenda. Any other changes, Larry? Anything from the council? No?
Mayor McFarland, I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Does
Okay,
Bob have to be excused or is he
we excused him.
okay?
You made note of that, right,
Okay.
Gloria? Thank you. Okay, so we'll move right to the item G, which is our consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered routine matters and will be enacted by one motion and one roll call vote of the council. There'll be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or member of the public so requests, in which event, the items will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence of the agenda. Does there anybody have any objections to the current list of consent agenda items?
None.
Mayor McFarland, I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Gloria, can I please get a roll call vote?
Councilmember Lavender.
Yes.
Councilmember McBride.
Yes.
Councilmember Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Councilmember Herman.
Yes.
Councilmember Powell.
Yes.
Mayor McFarland.
Yes. Okay, there's no item H, I, or J, so we'll move right to K, ordinances and resolutions. Item K1.
Thank you, Mayor. It's recommended that the mayor and city council approve the proposed amendments to the Business and Nonprofit Assistance Program and authorize the funding transfers within the Residential Assistance Program. On August 12, 2020, the city launched its first round of assistance programs through the CG CARES plan. The mayor and council allotted $500,000 for eligible businesses and federally recognized nonprofits. Applicants could qualify for a one-time reimbursement up to $10,000. Over the course of 3 months, the city distributed approximately $236,000 to 47 local businesses and nonprofits. The city launched the PPE program next on October 14th, 2020. Eligible businesses could qualify up to $2,500 for the purchase of PPE equipment, and we distributed approximately $26,399 to 15 businesses and nonprofits. Based on the discussion that we had at the last city council meeting on December 7th, staff has prepared an updated round 2 of the CG CARES Business and Nonprofit Assistance Program. This updated program will be an all-exclusive program providing reimbursement for rent, mortgage, utilities, PPE, and potentially extension of property for restaurants under the Executive Order 2020-60 to encourage outdoor dining. This program will have an approximate total of $237,601 available for reimbursement. This program will allow for new and returning applicants to apply up to $10,000 in additional funding, with an emphasis on prioritizing businesses and nonprofits that have not received prior city-based COVID-19 assistance. It would be assessed by our prior group that we had before, 5 individuals consisting of 3 staff members and 2 council members. We're developing a flyer right now that will go out and advertise for this. I know the mayor has offered to go door to door and pass this out, and many other council members.
I heard that.
I did, I said that.
We will include in the application an example of what we'd like to see for the profit loss statement, so it'll be very easy to understand. Applications will be accepted from December 30th through January 29th. They're eligible up to a cap of $20,000, so I just wanted to explain that a little bit. Meaning if in the first round they've got $5,000, that means they could get an additional $15,000 up to $20,000. Staff is also requesting authorization to move $50,000 from the originally allocated as part of the $250,000 for expanding internet access for students to be moved to the child care funds to further support learning hubs for students here at Casa Grande. And that's my staff report, if you have any questions.
Matt, go ahead.
You know how you said the max was 20,000, like if they got 5,000 the first time, then they could do 15,000? Does that include the PPE, like if they got the first round, then the PPE?
Yeah.
It's all in there, right?
combined.
Okay.
Yes, and for clarification on that, this goes from September, October, November, or October, November, December. So there's 3 different ways. So this is a different time period that we're covering, which the prior PPE was for a different time period.
Okay. And then also, sorry, is that all right? Yeah, they're doing the new CARES Act tonight. They're voting on it right now.
Right.
Is there a provision there to get more money like this? I mean, I know it's a literally 67-pound piece of stack of papers. Do we know? All you
Yeah,
get by
I
is
think,
the
I think
600.
the cities are scheduled to receive money through this new allocation if it gets passed. And we'll get it directly from the feds. It won't go through the state.
Okay.
That's my understanding anyway.
So, yeah, reason I'm asking is don't want to run out of this money right now if we're not going to get, but it looks like we might get more.
I think so.
All right, thanks.
I think there's a good chance it's gonna pass.
Yeah.
Lisa?
Well, and I'm just so glad that we are extending this again
Yeah.
and being a little bit more, not as exclusive on what it's for, because being on that committee, we saw so much need. And even if someone got the maximum amount of 10,000, it's still, when you looked at their bills and their profit and loss statements and everything, it's just devastating. So who would have ever thought we'd be in December and this is still going on? And it's a critical, these businesses it's not getting any better, especially for many of the restaurants.
264 days.
Right. So I'm just, happy to see
exact.
that. And then Stephen, of course, you learn from, the process. And so I was really happy to see the frequently asked questions, your samples, because I know it made our
That
job
made- yeah.
so much easier when someone, if there's like a template where they can fill it in, because we were digging through documents and trying to figure things out. So I like that you had an example and, template or whatever it is. So, but yeah, no, I'm really excited, and I think we do need to get the word out. You're right.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a lot of people that didn't know about it. So, I don't know how we're gonna expand that, but just.
I'm gonna go door to door.
Yeah, door to door. Businesses, your friends and neighbors and everyone else. So, there's definitely a need out there still. So, thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. Anybody else?
So can we talk just a moment about, and clarifying, because there's, I understand about the 20,000 total, and, there's some examples and stuff, but I think there's been a little bit of misconception as far as what they can apply for with, with this money, because we've seen some changes where the outdoor seating and those kind of things, And having sat on this group, I could see there may be some, some conflict about what is covered and what is not covered for this money. So I don't know if you've had an opportunity to think about that, or if you have thoughts about that you want to
Yeah,
share?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman McBride, pretty much as before, what it's going to cover, the only thing that we're adding to this is the extension of your premise. And what we've said in here, not necessarily for tables or chairs or heaters, those kind of things, it's more barriers to create the area that you need to extend your premise.
Yeah, the temporary
Right,
piece.
okay.
So that's the only thing that we've really added to that wasn't in the previous program.
So when we do the flyer or we do that outreach, we just want to make sure that we're very clear on that, because that way people don't waste their time pulling all that information together, and then for the group that reviews it to have to go back and say no. And I know that Mackenzie did a wonderful job with us, and so I think it will save him to make sure it's clarified.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for the question. Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Stephen. Seeing no other questions, then I'll call for a resolution, please. Gloria?
Resolution number 5253.1, a resolution of the council of the city of Casa Grande, Arizona, adopting an amendment to Resolution 5253 regarding the city of Casa Grande Community Relief Fund Plan.
Mayor McFarland, I move to approve resolution number 5253.1 as presented.
Second?
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Gloria, can I please get a roll call vote?
Councilmember Lavender.
Yes.
Councilmember McBride.
Yes.
Councilmember Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Councilmember Herman.
Yes.
Councilmember Powell.
Yes.
Mayor McFarland.
Before I vote, I want to thank staff for putting this together. I know I've been hounding you for it, and I appreciate it. It's, this is important, so thank you. Yes. All right, next item on the agenda is K2, consider ordinance number 1397.08.29. Are you covering this one, Stephen, or Mr. Wallace?
Larry and I are looking at it, and he makes more money, so I guess I go. Obviously, we had a chance to talk about this ordinance a little bit at the study session, so I don't want to rehash too much of it. I'm hoping that Stephen can show some revised language that we discussed there, so I'm going to stall for just a moment. But just a reminder for those people that weren't able to tune in for the study session, this ordinance is something that is allowed by Proposition 207, and staff's intent in bringing it to the council tonight is to provide for the status quo, at least till such time as staff and the community has a chance to look at some of the Arizona Department of Health Services rules, as well as address zoning matters related to medical marijuana, or recreational marijuana. Adult use marijuana is what we're actually calling it. So if anyone has any questions, I can do that. There was a question during the study session on section 8.30.030. And so what I've done is I've tried to revise language to address that, and it's on the screen in front of you. You can see in that under the new version of 8.30, what we did was we took out possess, smoke, or consume as being prohibited on property that is occupied, owned, or controlled, or operated in the city in paragraph 1. We did add to smoke or consume, we just added in the language or on property occupied, owned, controlled, or operated by a city in paragraph 2. The net effect of that is it does the violations in paragraph 1, which are a class 2 misdemeanor, do not include possession, smoke, or consumption. Those will be a petty offense if they occur on public property. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does that answer your question, Lisa? Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else? All right, seeing none, then I'll call for an ordinance number, please.
Ordinance number 1397.08.29, An ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Casa Grande, Arizona, amending Title 8, Health and Safety of the Casa Grande Municipal Code by adding a new Chapter 8.30 relating to the regulation of adult-use marijuana and setting forth violations, penalties, providing for severability of its provisions.
Mayor McFarland, I move approval of, is it amended, as amended?
Ordinance, yeah.
Okay, ordinance number 1397.08.29 as amended?
Second.
Just to make clear, what we're talking about is as amended by staff prior to the motion. But I think you've made it clear that it does include that new language in
Correct.
section 8.03.030.
Second?
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Can I please get a roll call vote?
Councilmember Lavender.
Yes.
Councilmember McBride.
Yes.
Councilmember Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Councilmember Herman.
Yeah, I'm gonna vote yes, but also because we can bring it back quickly, because as of right now, we can only have the one place. I just don't wanna miss out on any opportunities for people, so, yes.
Councilmember Powell.
Yes.
Mayor McFarland.
Yes. All right. We have one more item here other than reports, so item L1 is public hearing on our proposed 2030 general plan. Which I like the book. Thank you, Paul.
Yes.
It is.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
It has nice maps in it.
So, Mayor and members of council, this is a public hearing on the general plan. It will precede your final vote on the plan on your January 4th meeting. But I thought maybe for this meeting, what would be appropriate just to talk a little bit about the changes that have been made to this document since last time I was here speaking to you, which I believe was about maybe your first meeting in October. We were in the middle of the 60-day review period at that time. Of course, the 60-day review period is now concluded. We've received all those comments. We've made some revisions to the plan as a result of that. I would like to just talk a little bit about those and so you understand what changes have been made. The version of the plan that you each have now received a printed copy of do reflect all the changes that resulted from that 60-day review. If it's okay with you, I'll just take a moment or two to review a couple of the other changes that we had made. So let me just tell you, we are referring to this draft of the plan as your pre-final. This plan that you received, this last version, actually is going through one final editorial review. We hired Donovan Kramer at Pinell Central to do the final editorial review, which I call editing for grammar, spelling, font, and format. And he completed that work, I think on Friday or over the weekend, and so we're making the final revisions to reflect his editorial comments, and they should be in the version that I present to you at the January 4th meeting. So this is a little bit, these are the steps that we've gone through as we've walked this path towards completing this new general plan. And it actually started back in May of 19, where council approved a public participation plan. So we've been working on the plan for about 18 months now. The most recent things that have happened since I guess I was here at the October 19th meeting was we did do the online public presentation using various online platforms. You can see noted there. The Planning Commission held a public hearing, the first of two required public hearings on December 3rd, and then the second of their required public hearings at a different location, which was at the Community Rec Center, and a vote on it on December 8th. The Planning Commission did vote, made a recommendation to council that the plan should be approved. If you recall, as we developed this new general plan, we identified some community issues that we thought the new plan should really address. One is really a forefront issue of water resources and really think about how the limited water resources that we have can support growth and development, a desire to promote infill of land that can be easily served by existing infrastructure and city services, the need to expand housing choices to accommodate all levels, income levels, and demographics within the community, the desire to bring new activity and development into the downtown area, and to drive growth through the creation of new quality commercial industrial development and well-paying jobs. I do believe that this new plan does a good job of addressing all of those issues. This is sort of a summary of some of the major changes that actually happened between the 2020 general plan, our current one, and the new 2030 general plan. I won't go into much detail on those, but those are all changes to address some of those emerging issues. The 60-day review period, which is required by the statute, we did receive a number of comments. We received some from the general public, some from our steering forum members, some from our technical advisory, land developers, Central Arizona College, the elementary school district, city council, the Alliance for Livable Communities, Center for Future of Arizona, the city of Eloy, and the city of Maricopa provided comments, and city planning staff. So we had a good amount of public input. I'm going to tell you that the biggest change that resulted from the public input was a realization that some of our subdivisions that actually had approved certificates of assured water supply, many of those were in a preliminary plat stage. We actually had placed them in a category, a land use category, that was going to create a barrier to allowing them to develop as single-family subdivisions. Some of those subdivisions existed close to the I-10 corridor, wherein they had been put in the commerce and business category, and actually some had been put and existed within sort of our industrial category along Gila Bend Highway. You can see those are numbered 7 and 8. So we made a policy shift to try to change the land use designations of subdivisions that had existing certificates of assured water supply and put them in the neighborhoods category so they could actually be constructed as single-family neighborhoods. We, as you know, we have a limited amount of platted lots or lots that are on preliminary plats that have approved certificates of assured water supply, and that's kind of the inventory that controls the growth of our single-family subdivisions in the future. So we wanted to make sure that we preserved as many of those as possible. So we did make some refinements along the edges of those to make sure that those subdivisions were able to be developed. Another change we made was, this is our growth map for Phase 1 growth area. And Phase 1 growth area is the area that we defined that basically all those subdivisions I mentioned that have certificates of assured water supply exist within Phase 1, as well as in Phase 1 we have the ability to serve that land with our existing wastewater treatment plant. The area north of Val Vista, west of the 10, or west of Pinal actually, was not in the Phase 1 area. It's sort of, the majority of the Copper Mountain Ranch, PAD. We have since understood that there's the potential for the Copper Mountain Ranch Water Company, which the city actually owns, to provide water service to that development in the somewhat near future. So we did add that into Phase 1 growth area because we can provide water to it, we believe, in the near future. One last change we made was to our transportation roadway map, because ADOT has now acknowledged a shift in the preferred corridor for the I-11 that actually puts I-11 where we asked it to be placed. The city of Casa Grande asked it to be placed, which is essentially following the Montgomery Road alignment. So we've now shown the potential future I-11 corridor following the Montgomery Road alignment. We didn't have that in before because ADOT had not committed to agreeing to that shift, but they have now. So remaining steps in this approval process, so we've talked about the December meetings for Planning Commission. We're here tonight at the December 21st meeting. On January 4th, we will schedule the general plan for a formal vote by council on adoption and scheduling it for a public vote at the May 18th, 2021 mail-in election. So that summarizes everything that I wanted to say this evening, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Powell?
On the general plan, I was looking through it, and I came up with a couple of areas what I just wanted to mention. I think it's really outstanding that we're looking at the compatibility. I think is huge to minimize land use conflicts, and I think that's what happens so often. And promote and compatible between residential and non-residential developments, increase use of compatibility. Though I think those are really, really good and outstanding, Paul, and I think that'll really bring home some important things. One of the other areas I had was that was the development standards. There was the assured water supply. And the 237. The water supply, I do not believe that we will have enough water to go down the road like we would like to go. It's interesting, this came out yesterday, and I don't know how many of you saw it, but it basically is 6 Arizona counties may be uninhabitable in the next 30 years due to climate change, studies show. Number 2 in the nation is Pinell County, number 2. The Arizona counties listed include Pinell, Graham, Maricopa. The study's finding listed Pinell County in Arizona as the second most at-risk county in the United States of being uninhabitable. And being able to be habitable is going to depend a lot on availability of water, what we can do and what we can't do. Pinell County faces major challenges when it comes to heat, farm crop yields, wildfires, economy. It gave it the number 2 spot on the list. The only other county that is more at risk than Pinell County is Bedford County, South Carolina. And due to rising sea and humidity, the east is worried about humidity. The humidity seems to be gathering, but Arizona, however, is the vast majority of resources, and the few amounts of regulations the state has made are only put forward around Phoenix and Tucson, while the rest of the state is left to fend for itself. And we know that. You've got the state of Maricopa and the state of Pima County. This situation between the center quarter of the state, where all the resources and regulations of the state are concentrated, and the entire rest of the state is getting no benefit from these measures, is unacceptable. Also looking at Joanna Allhands has written a lot about water in the Arizona Republic, and she's quite good at it. But here, headlines on this one right here it says, one more warm, dry winter could spell shortage for Lake Mead and trouble for Arizona. The warm, dry weather's been having maybe good for moving activities outside, but it's bad news for the water supply. She's talking about basically the likely would push Mead into a first-time shortage declaration. the chances are growing and quickly that a warm, dry winter could push Lake Powell to a trigger point about a year from now that could result in significantly less water for Lake Mead, which supplies about 40% of Arizona water supply. Likely would push Mead into first-term shortage declaration, and the same things will happen the following year if it makes it likely plunge Mead into more severe shortage, a depth from which the lake is unlikely to recover for any time soon. These are issues, I think, that are really important. And one of the things I really, and it's in this one back here about trying to obtain water, I think we need to go back. This right here is what was proposed on harvesting the Mississippi floodwater and bringing down the federal corridor from Davenport, Iowa to Green River, Wyoming, where it dumps into the Colorado. And the rest of it, God built it. Water comes right on down, fills the dams back, does those things. They had $19 billion worth of damage in 2019 from the flooding. And it's kind of a win-win. Anyway, we took this to the legislature in Arizona, and it got past the House with just one no vote, total support. And what we're asking for is to do a check on feasibility. And they're asking Congress to conduct a feasibility study that would examine how much water, how possible it is to do it. And that if it is possible, that they would go ahead and put diversion dams in at Davenport. And the federal, you don't have to buy any land because the federal corridor goes all the way and it's pretty flat and straight. But in January, we're going to go back on this again, and I don't know that it wouldn't be a bad idea to have the mayor and some other people express how, and this is not only for Arizona, this is for all 7 basin states. A year ago, they had plenty of water. Right now, they don't. This heat and our changing conditions is just messing everything up. So I think, Paul, you've got it listed in here and stuff, but I think it's something we need to look at more thoroughly and try to get some water in here, because without water, we don't go anywhere. And our development's stopped because we don't have water. We have a lot of issues with that. And if we could get something like this coming down where we would have a water source. The funny thing is, in 1968, when they passed the approval for the Central Arizona project, the federal government promised that they would bring water to the Colorado River for us, additional water. But they never had a way to do it, and they haven't done it. This would be about the only way in the world you're going to do it, is to get the water to come down from somewhere else where it's doing damage. And every bit of water we take away from floodwater helps them, and every drop that comes down would help us, and we would pipe it instead of putting a ditch or those kind of things, and pipe it into the river. But as I say, I think that as we look forward as a city council, this is something that's pretty important. And I don't know if you and Larry and some others, wanted to sit down with some people up there. I think we can get. Dunn is the representative, Tim Dunn from Yuma, who's Bill Dunn's cousin, Matt, which makes him maybe related to you.
He's my cousin.
And so we have to take Matt with us.
Kind of.
He got everything together, and as I say, we had it right there, and all it had to have was approval of the Senate. And that damn COVID-19 came along, and it blew everything up. Never got a hearing. So we're going to have to try to start from scratch again. But if you look at Arizona, how else in the 7 other states, we can't generate from our states enough water to continue to develop and to farm and to do those kind of things. And if we could work something out to bring floodwaters away from the Mississippi and down into Colorado River, it would be a long-term solution. But Anyway, I've preached enough, so I'm gonna pass the collection plate here in a minute.
Anybody else have any other comments?
I just want to say, Paul, this is a great job you guys did. This is the best one I've seen done,
Concur.
the general plan.
Thank you, Mr. Powell.
And there's a lot of effort put into it and a lot of people involved. And this guy over here, he got to be involved as the chairman but it, as I say, it really has some good ideas in there and I really applaud it. I went through it and what I was reading, I liked a lot. So I think you did a great job.
Lisa?
And I agree, and I wanted to thank both of you, because I know the mayor and Dick, were both really active, but I agree, Paul, I think, just the public input, I went to the one meeting at the rec center, and people were really excited and engaged, and, when you look at these priority areas, with the water resources, the infill with the land, housing, what else, jobs, downtown area, I mean, those are the priorities, and so I just think you captured so much, and I just wanted to thank you guys and all of you for all of your hard work. I agree. It was great going through. I mean, not only is it's like a beautiful book, but it's like, wow, this is good stuff. So good job.
Thank you very
Matt?
much.
Not to belabor too much, but thank you, and thank you to the committee that volunteered to do it. They put in a lot of work. And I really was wondering about those housing developments, but that people always ask, why do you let them build new housing when we have all these ones? But now we've used our powers that we can use, if this passes, to encourage them to use the pre-platted housing subdivisions with the water already there, which helps this problem a little bit, but, I mean, I'm not nearly as versed as Mr. Powell about it, but, it seems like a great idea, and then I really love the different, urban type stuff that you just didn't leave in one place, but a few different places around the city to build character in different areas. Thank you.
I think that Jeff was on this committee too, but I just, I'm kind of kudos to Paul, because looking at all the people who are involved in this, it was probably like herding cattle much of the time. And so the finished product looks wonderful. Thank you.
Herding cats more like.
Yeah, more like cats
Cattle.
sometimes, yeah.
In honor of Mr. Powell.
No, everyone made great contributions. It was a team effort, and so I really appreciate all the input that we've received throughout the process. It's made a better
Yeah,
plan.
It was a good process, I think. And I think everybody participated too, which was good.
Yes.
We got good participation. Good participation from the community.
Right.
So,
I had to deliver my wife and daughter. My daughter's having a birthday, and they're gonna go to the casino and have dinner and everything. And that stretch along the road going is the worst. It's ugly, and they're about this far apart. You can get the sugar passed to you from the next window across from you, and I'm glad we're not seeing that kind of stuff here.
anybody else have any other comments, questions? Thank you, Paul. Thank you, especially to your staff. Please pass along our appreciation.
I will. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Mayor.
All right, this is a public hearing, so I will open the floor for public comment on the general plan. Since there's one general public here. I don't know if you like me calling you general public, but,
Happy you attended tonight.
Yeah.
all right, well, seeing none, then I will close the public hearing portion of this. And that's all there is to it, because we'll present this again on June 4th for a final vote. Correct?
June.
I'm sorry, did I say June? January 4th, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. I was hoping COVID was over.
Yeah.
All right. Seeing no other business then, other than our reports, we'll start with Mr. Lavender over there, and we'll work our way around.
Well, I want to congratulate you, Larry, on your well-deserved award. So congratulations.
Yes.
Yes.
Also, as part of my new employee process, I've had contact with the city clerk's office, HR, IT, and your office. And the level of professionalism And the practice and of social distancing is to be commendable, so all of you, congratulations and thanks for what you're doing. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all of our staff.
Thank you, Mr. Lavender. Ms. McBride?
Just one thing, I had the opportunity to sit in and be a quiet observer to the open forum that was done on the Evergreen Irrigation District, and hats off to Steve Hardesty and Stephen Weaver, and we had more staff there than public, but it was great information, and, you know, the gentleman that was talking did a great job, so I think that it was needed, and I look forward to hearing more about, you know, what the residents plan on doing. That's it. Merry Christmas.
Lisa?
I don't have much yet. Congratulations, Larry, but just wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and just be safe. Let's really try to wear these masks, guys. We need to do our part, and with the holidays coming, it's so easy to let our guard down, but I'm just hoping that the number went down just a little bit, right, Mayor? So let's just hope we can keep it going down. So Merry Christmas, everyone, stay safe.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. In case you missed it, ASU did win their last 2 games, one of them very handily. If you put it upside down, it's LOL, 77. So Nogales Tech or whatever, that other school. But anyway, it was a lot of fun, and and also wanted to, on a serious note, thank Shane Leonard, he was the consultant for the Evergreen District, and he's forgotten more about irrigation districts, I think, than many of us will ever know. And I'm gonna preempt this statement because I did all my shopping in Casa Grande, except for I had to go to the Scottsdale Mall because there's a few stores there that we cannot buy in Casa Grande. But there's a great big corner sign said Lucid Motors coming soon, so they're gonna have a store at the Scottsdale Fashion
Really?
Square. Yeah, it was huge. Didn't mention Casa Grande, but it was still there. So great for us and great for everybody. But they have it's gonna be a great presence there. So anyway, that was exciting to see, and we just one more time we've been going out on the weekends and still looking at. Can't cover all the light displays in one night.
I
So
know.
Eric and I cruise every weekend and look at even more, and
Yeah.
it's just amazing what people did with their houses and the businesses as well. So, and I know the voting's over, so we'll probably have some results very soon. And with that, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and stay safe, have fun, and thank you very much for being part of our community. So, thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Mr. Powell?
I'm still trying to get over being quarantined for 14 or 15 days or whatever it was, and as they say, I had 3 women, and they all told me to stay in my darn room, not to come out, and then if I did, I had to have a mask on, and
Slide food under the door? Slide some food in there?
and it is for real, I will tell you that, we need to be very careful with it, and it's frightening, and it mutates, which it's done. I mean, everybody saw that in Britain and England. They've got a new one that is the same thing, but a different variation of it. But
You're banned from Europe.
I know so many people, I hope people take advantage of getting a shot and getting vaccinated, because as you looked at this some time ago, it looked like the only way in the world this was gonna stop was have some way to stop, a vaccine to stop a viral infection. And they're getting a lot of people done already. And so hopefully it'll reach Casa Grande and we can all get one at some point in time. But I know, I feel badly, some people that don't want to, I don't think they realize how dangerous this can be, and how, probably the saddest thing about it is somebody that's in there on a ventilator, and they're dying, and nobody can be there with them. They're by themselves when it happens, and the family feels terrible, and so I just hope that we can get through this and encourage people I know you do a lot, Mayor. I didn't know if you were working for President Trump for a while, the way you were putting all that stuff on.
Still tracking it. He's not.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. So I'll give my COVID update, my normal dark and dreary picture here. 264 days, been tracking it now. And this is kind of the post holiday, Thanksgiving spike. And we're sitting at, this is Arizona, state of Arizona, the last 30 days is 166,000 cases. In the last,
that again.
166,000 COVID cases in the last 30 days. That's 36% of all cases for the year have happened in the last 30 days.
Arizona's about at the top right now, aren't we?
There's a couple other hot spots. Last 7 days, it's 41,000, just in the last 7 days. And our positivity rate's about 29%. That means that 29 out of 100 people who get tested test positive. The state's at 601 infections per 100,000. That's one of the benchmarks. For Pinal County, last 30 days, it's 9,189, and it's 38% of all tests, or not tests, but infections, for the last 264 days. And then the county's positivity rate is not as high as the state. We're at about 26%, and that's coming down, so that's a good thing. And they're at 488 infections per 100,000. Again, we're supposed to be at 100 or less. That's the benchmark to be moderate. So we're at extreme on all benchmarks: hospitalizations, positivity rates, the infections per 100,000.
Lack of beds, too, is really critical, isn't it?
Yeah, I have that information too. So in Casa Grande, last 30 days, it's been about 1,400 cases. 37, that's in 85122 only. That's 37% of all the infections have happened in the last 30 days. Last 7 days, last week, it's 365. So I know when this thing started, somebody says, I don't even know anybody who's been sick. Now I think everybody knows somebody who's been sick, if not several people or families that have been sick. So it has kind of overwhelmed us, quite frankly. 600, and we're at 608 per 100,000. County's at 488. We're 608. So we're kind of a hot spot in the county. Banner is at 140% of their summer peak. And coincidentally, their ICUs are almost at 140% capacity, the ICU at Banner. And he says, this is from Brian, who's the CEO, Brian Keller, that the people who they have in the hospital are very sick, very, very sick, worse than he saw in the summertime. So I will say that the death rates are down, because I think that we figured out ways to treat it, but there's just so many people now. And then the other couple good things that I track are the 7-day moving averages. And so Pinal County, the last 4 days, we've been, and this is increase, right? So I tracked 7-day, and then the increases have been at 89, 89, 85. The other day was 104. So 104 means it was a 4% increase over the previous 7 days. So, but the trend is down. So that's a good thing. And in 85122, our trend is down also. So we're kind of mirroring the county as far as the moving average totals for infections. So now that cheery news. Vaccines should arrive this week in Pinal County. So we not sure what the schedule is going to be yet. Today, tomorrow, sometime this week they expect them. And the hospital Banner is one of the locations that will be issuing vaccines. I would do want to caution people that the first wave of vaccines are probably going to be used up by medical staff. So not to expect that they're in the tier 1 vaccine stage. So don't know how many vaccines we'll get because that information hasn't been shared. But we do expect to see some information this week on that. Do want to also add some positive news. We got November's building permits in. We're now at over 1,100 new permits this year, which is phenomenal. It was a smaller number than the previous months. It's only about 47 permits, but still over last year in terms of number of permits that were issued in November last year versus this year. So that's all good stuff. We have 16 builders now in town. Compare that to 2 years ago we had 2. So phenomenal.
It's a huge amount of lumber being nailed all over the place. Right?
It's everywhere. Yeah, if you've gone by Ghost Hollow, it's full.
Yeah.
And it was empty, 6 months ago? So, good to see. In fact, tonight we interviewed a couple people for our boards and commissions, which we still do have some openings if anyone is interested. And Donna and I interviewed a couple new people, new residents to the city of Casa Grande. It was really exciting to talk to them. One of them actually works at Lucid and is their international supply manager. And he bought a home here in Casa Grande, so that's awesome. The other person was from California. He had moved here. He had moved here, and both are very interested in being part of our community and want to get involved with the boards and commissions. So good to see that we have good people coming forward and wanting to be involved. The tours. So the holiday tour winners for the continuous display winners. Drum roll. All right, the People's Choice. Residential home, number 21, 1747 East Birch Street. Figueroa family, did I say that right?
What was
Congratulations to them.
What was the theme of their,
I don't know.
oh, okay. Because I just know them by the theme, with their
Yeah.
house.
People's Choice, number 2 business, was number 23, Chick-fil-A.
Oh, theirs is
Really
cool.
cute, yeah.
Yeah, they even decorated their drive-through.
Yeah,
That was
they
kind of
did.
cool. Yeah.
It's really cute.
Most original is number 15, and that address it's a home, 2201 North Magdalena Place, the Francisco family. Sorry, it didn't say what their theme was. Most festive is number 3, and that's located at 10709 West Shetland Inn. The Menta family, okay? Oh, Lane, sorry, not Inn. The biggest and brightest is number 30 at 266 West Auburn Sky Court, the Medell family. That's just down the street from my house. It was very well lit. I don't know what their power bill is going to be, but it was beautiful. So those are the winners. Congratulations to all those winners. I'm sure the department will be getting in contact with them for their prizes. Okay, great. Thank you, Larry. And then just an update too. We did announce, or Larry announced last week, the Trails project and the contractor that we've selected. So that project will start to move forward. The first leg of it, as a reminder, is from Rotary to Peart officially, but we're going to try and get it all the way to the community center, as Mr. Raines told me today. So I'm going to hold you to that, Larry.
I don't think you're supposed to say that out loud.
Never tell me anything you don't want me to repeat.
Can I get an
Yeah, Harold, you know what you want?
So that's exciting. I'm excited for that. It's been long overdue, and I will continue to push for that. So. Other than that, I'm glad to be back. I did go and get tested on Saturday, and my test was negative. I just got the results like 5 minutes ago, so
How many
I'm
tests have you
safe.
had?
Good.
Oh, that's good.
3?
Yeah. All right, does anybody have anything else they want to add? Staff, anybody?
Just wish everybody a Merry Christmas.
Yes, absolutely. Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy New Year, happy holidays. Have a safe holiday, because these spikes, we don't need to see them again, but
And as
I've
we
got a bad
leave
feeling.
tonight, look for the star
Oh, yeah. Great
in the
conjunction.
western sky, right?
Oh, okay.
Over at 6:30 it was.
Yeah,
We
we
missed it,
Oh,
but it said until Christmas, you didn't see it.
All right, thank you, everybody, and no other business? Meeting adjourned.